What if I told you that there are some boxers who made millions in the ring but lost it all? From Riddick Bowe, who once earned over $80 million but later declared bankruptcy and sold his properties, to Mike Tyson, who blew through $300 million fortune with reckless spending and bad decisions. Here are 10 boxers who went broke instantly. Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson's story is one of the wildest in boxing history. In 1986, at just 20 years old, he became the youngest fighter ever to win the heavyweight titles of the WBC, IBF, and WBA. A year later, he cemented his place in history by knocking out Michael Spinks in just 91 seconds, becoming the lineal champion. At such a young age, he was already crowned one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. Over his career, Tyson earned around $400 million from his fights, endorsements, and appearances. He was a global superstar, feared in the ring, and adored by the crowd. But behind all the success, money was slipping through his hands faster than he could make it. By the 1990s, his financial problems had already begun. Tyson spent most of his money on gold chains, luxury cars, mansions, designer clothes, and even kept Siberian tigers as pets. In one shocking moment, he walked into a Las Vegas jewelry shop in 2002 and picked up a gold chain worth over $170,000, covered in 80 carats of diamonds, without even paying for it. In 2000, his accountants showed that although he had earned $65.7 million in a single year, he still started out more than $3 million in debt. By 2003, he was forced to file for bankruptcy. The media at the time revealed that he had debts of around $23 million. Among his creditors were the IRS, the British Tax Office, and even U.S. states like Georgia and Michigan. Tyson accused those around him, especially his promoter Don King, of stealing millions. He even filed a $100 million lawsuit against King, claiming he had been cheated during the peak of his career. When he retired in 2005, Tyson found himself in a new position. He wasn't fighting for titles anymore, but for survival. He promoted websites, endorsed products, and even agreed to exhibition fights just to pay the bills. In 2006, he stepped back into the ring for a 4-round exhibition against Corey Sanders. After fans reacted poorly, the rest of the planned Tyson's World Tour was canceled. Looking back, Tyson himself admitted how desperate things had become. He said the exhibitions wouldn't fix his financial troubles, but at least they gave him a reason to keep moving forward. Evander Holyfield. Evander Holyfield was once one of the most feared names in boxing. His rise began as an amateur when he represented the United States at the 1984 Summer Olympics and won a bronze medal in the light heavyweight division. Soon after, at just 21 years old, he turned professional. In 1985, he moved up to cruiserweight, and by the next year, he was already a world champion after defeating Dwight Muhammad Qawi for the WBA title. By the late 1980s, Holyfield had become the undisputed champion in the cruiserweight division, and in the early 1990s, he achieved the same in the heavyweight division. This made him the only boxer in history to become the undisputed champion in 2 weight classes during the 3-belt era. This was a rare accomplishment that was only later surpassed in the 4-belt era by Terence Crawford, Naoya Inoue, and Oleksandr Usyk. Holyfield also became the only man to win the World Heavyweight Championship 4 separate times. Throughout his career, he held the WBA, WBC, and IBF titles at different points, from 1990 to 1992. Again from 1993 to 1994, then from 1996 to 1997-1999, and once more in the early 2000s. Holyfield officially retired in 2014. Yet despite earning over $500 million during his career, he faced serious financial troubles. In 2008, Washington Mutual Bank placed a legal notice announcing that his enormous Atlanta estate, worth $10 million, with 54,000 square feet, 109 rooms, and 17 bathrooms, would be auctioned off due to foreclosure. Rapper Rick Ross eventually bought the mansion. Around the same time, he was also sued by the mother of one of his children for missing child support payments, while a landscaping company in Utah went to court over $550,000 in unpaid bills. His money was drained by overspending, failed business deals, constant child support obligations, and 3 divorces. By 2012, The Independent reported that Holyfield was flat broke and bankrupt. This was a shocking fall for a man who had once stood at the top of the boxing world. Despite earning around £350 million, much of it was gone. Sugar Robinson. Sugar Ray Robinson is often remembered as the greatest boxer of all time, pound for pound. He turned professional in 1940 when he was just 19 years old. By 1951, he had built an incredible record of 129 wins, 1 loss, and 2 draws, with 85 of those wins coming by knockout. Between 1943 and 1951, Robinson went on a 91-fight unbeaten streak, which still ranks as one of the longest in boxing history. Robinson first became world welterweight champion in 1946 and held the title until 1951. That same year, he also won the world middleweight title. In 1952, he decided to retire, leaving the sport with a record of 131 wins, 3 losses, 1 draw, and 1 no contest. During retirement, Robinson became a dancer, performing in Las Vegas and even touring Europe. But while he was away on tour, his businesses back home in the United States began to crumble. Robinson had invested in several ventures, including Sugar Ray's Cafe, a dry cleaning business, a barber shop, and even a lingerie store. Altogether, his businesses were worth about $300,000. He left them in the hands of his business manager, but when he returned, he discovered that $250,000 had gone missing. On top of that, he faced mortgage foreclosures and threats from the IRS over unpaid taxes. The only way Robinson could save himself financially was to return to the ring. Unlike before, when he fought for glory and titles, he now had to fight just to pay the bills. At one point, he was forced to fight 5 times in only 35 days, sometimes earning as little as $1,100 per bout. By the time he finally retired for good, after losing to Joey Archer in 1965, his record stood at 175 wins, 19 losses, 6 draws, and 2 no contests, with 110 knockouts across 202 fights. He is still ranked as one of the most powerful punchers in history, and in 2003, The Ring magazine placed him at number 11 on its list of the greatest punchers of all time. After retiring again, Robinson turned to acting and appeared in several TV shows and movies. He had roles in Mission Impossible and in an episode of Land of the Giants, where he played a washed-up boxer running a nightclub. He also acted in films like The Detective, alongside Frank Sinatra, and the cult classic Candy. Joe Louis. Joe Louis is remembered as one of the greatest and most influential boxers in history. He held the World Heavyweight Championship from 1937 to 1949, making 25 successful title defenses in a row, a record that still stands across all weight divisions. His reign as champion was also the longest in boxing history. But while Louis earned more than $4.6 million during his career, most of the money never stayed with him. After all the cuts taken by his handlers and managers, he received only about $800,000. Despite this, Louis was known for being incredibly generous. He paid for homes, cars, and education for his parents and siblings, often borrowing money to do so. He also tried his hand at business, but none of his ventures succeeded. Among them were the Joe Louis Restaurant, Joe Louis Insurance Company, Joe Louis Milk Company, Joe Louis Pomade, Joe Louis Punch, a softball team called the Brown Bombers, a horse farm, and even a nightclub in Chicago called the Rum Boogie Cafe. All of these eventually failed, leaving him with more debt than income. His biggest problem, however, came from taxes. Louis had trusted his finances to his former manager, Mike Jacobs, and when the government came calling, Louis was left holding the bill. By the early 1950s, the IRS said he owed more than $500,000 in unpaid taxes. With interest piling up every year, his debt eventually grew to over $1 million. The tax rate at the time was so high, around 90%, that even when Louis tried to stage a comeback to earn money, almost everything went straight back to the government. The situation was so bad that when his mother died in 1953, the IRS even seized the $667 she had left to him in her will. To survive, Louis had to look for income outside the ring. He appeared on quiz shows, worked as a greeter at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas thanks to an old army friend, and even stepped into professional wrestling for a short time. He won matches against Cowboy Rocky Lee, but after discovering he had a heart condition, he retired from competing. Instead, he worked as a wrestling referee until 1972. Due to how things were difficult, his former rival, Max Schmeling, who once fought him in 2 famous bouts, gave Louis financial support in his later years. Even mobster Frank Lucas, frustrated with how the government had treated Louis, once paid off a $50,000 tax bill for him. Eventually, in the 1960s, the IRS agreed to settle for payments based on Louis's current income rather than the full debt, which finally allowed him to live with some comfort. Riddick Bowe. Riddick Bowe was once one of the most feared heavyweights in the world. He turned professional in 1989, and by 1992, he reached the top of the boxing world when he defeated the unbeaten former undisputed cruiserweight champion Evander Holyfield. That win made Bowe the unified heavyweight champion, holding the WBA, WCB, and IBF titles at the same time. For a moment, he was the king of the division, but as fast as he rose, Bowe's career also faced setbacks. His infamous fights with Andrew Golota, where Golota was disqualified twice for repeated low blows, marked the end of Bowe's prime. After that, he stepped away from the sport, making only low-key comebacks in 2004 and 2008 that never lived up to his earlier greatness. Despite earning an estimated $80 million from boxing purses, pay-per-view bonuses, and endorsements, Bowe's fortune didn't last. By the mid-2000s, his money was gone. In 2005, he filed for bankruptcy, listing more than $4.1 million in debt. At one point, he still had around $15 million left after retiring, but by 2009, even that was gone. Once a heavyweight champion, Bowe was reduced to selling autographs at flea markets just to survive. He later claimed that his former manager had stolen $15 million from him, but regardless of the cause, the wealth he had worked so hard for had disappeared. On top of that, many believed he suffered brain damage from years in the ring, which hurt his ability to perform and made his attempted comebacks unsuccessful. Although he returned to fight again in 2008, winning against lesser opponents, the man who once ruled the heavyweight division was no longer the same fighter. If you're enjoying this video, appreciate it by giving it a thumbs up. And if you have not subscribed, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button. Thomas Hearns. Tommy Hearns had a tall, slender frame with long arms and broad shoulders that gave him a unique advantage in the ring. His build allowed him to move up more than 50 pounds during his career and still compete at the highest level. Hearns made history by becoming the first boxer ever to win world titles in 5 different weight divisions: welterweight, light middleweight, middleweight, super middleweight, and light heavyweight. No matter how much weight he carried, he remained a dangerous puncher. In fact, the Ring magazine ranked him number 18 on its list of the 100 greatest punchers of all time. Hearns began his professional career in explosive fashion, knocking out his first 17 opponents. By 1980, he had built an undefeated 28-0 record and faced Mexico's long-reigning champion, Pipino Cuevas, for the welterweight title. Hearns ended Cuevas's 4-year reign, stopping him in the second round by TKO and announcing himself as one of boxing's brightest stars. Hearns won his last world title in 1999, but lost it the following year. He stayed retired until making a short comeback in 2005 and 2006, winning 2 fights against journeymen John Long and Shannon Landberg. Over the years, Hearns became part of some of the biggest fights in history. His battles against legends like Marvin Hagler and Sugar Ray Leonard were massive events that brought in millions of dollars. But when the bright lights faded, life outside the ring wasn't as glamorous. Though Hearns earned as much as $40 million during his prime, financial troubles caught up with him. The IRS came knocking, and he owed around $1 million in taxes and mortgage debt. He also faced foreclosure on his home. In 2010, Hearns was forced to auction off many of his prized possessions at the auction block in Detroit. Items included a classic 1957 Chevy, a 47-foot fountain boat, and valuable boxing memorabilia. His debt to the IRS was eventually set at $250,000, which he accepted responsibility for. Hearns explained that his financial downfall came from being too generous with his large extended family, always trying to help but stretching himself too thin. Joe Frazier. Joe Frazier, also known as Smokin' Joe, was one of the toughest fighters of his time. Born with a powerful left hand and a never-quit style, he fought from 1965 to 1981 and became famous for always pressing forward, no matter who was in front of him. In 1971, he shocked the world by becoming the first man to defeat Muhammad Ali. Before that, he had already won a gold medal at the 1964 Olympics, and later he held the heavyweight title from 1970 to 1973. However, despite his success in the ring, according to the New York Times, Frazier lost much of his fortune because of bad business deals, his generous nature, and reckless spending. While other boxing legends of his time, like Ali, George Foreman, and Larry Holmes, were millionaires, Frazier struggled. When asked about his money, he often joked and dodged the question. He once said with a grin, "Are you asking me how much money I have? I got plenty of money." In a 2006 HBO documentary on the fight in Manila, Frazier was interviewed, living in his one-room apartment on the second floor of his gym in Philadelphia. His financial troubles started back in his prime years. In 1973, Frazier bought 140 acres of land in Pennsylvania for $843,000. A few years later, a developer agreed to buy it for $1.8 million, and Frazier received payments from a trust tied to the deal. But when the trust went bankrupt, the money stopped coming. Frazier claimed his signature had been forged on documents and sued his partners, but the land was eventually turned into a residential community now worth around $100 million, none of which went to him. Still, Frazier didn't stop giving back. He trained fighters at his gym on Broad Street in Philadelphia and started the Smoke and Joe Frazier Foundation to help struggling youth. Sadly, when his health declined, the foundation fell apart, and in 2009, he had to sell the gym. Randolph Turpin. Randy Turpin was one of Britain's most celebrated boxers in the 1940s and 1950s. In 1951, he shocked the world when he beat Sugar Ray Robinson to become world middleweight champion. His story was the classic tale of rags to riches. He rose out of poverty, made a fortune, and then lost almost everything, ending his life in hardship and debt. At the height of his success, Turpin lived freely with money. He believed it was meant to be spent, not saved, and he had no interest in keeping track of it. If someone came to him with a sad story, he was quick to give or lend them money. His manager once said Turpin earned around £300,000 in his career, which is worth about £7 million today. Turpin himself admitted, "I am really a most illiterate man about money." Bad business decisions made things worse. Against his manager's advice, he bought the Great Ormes Head Hotel with a partner who later proved untrustworthy. The hotel never made a profit and was eventually sold at a loss, draining his wealth. After his second fight with Robinson, Turpin decided he no longer wanted his manager or accountant controlling his money. He took charge himself, spending heavily despite warnings that boxing was a short career. His biggest mistake came when he was paid in cash for the rights to televise one of his fights. Instead of declaring it to the tax office, he handed the money to someone he trusted for safekeeping. That person not only refused to return the cash, but also reported Turpin for tax evasion. From then on, his troubles with the Inland Revenue grew, and he was constantly hounded for unpaid taxes. By the early 1960s, his fortunes had completely collapsed. He turned to wrestling to make a living, then later ran a small cafe, living in the flat above it. But the income was barely enough. Just 3 days before his death, he received a final demand for £800 in unpaid tax, money he no longer had. To make matters worse, the council planned to demolish the building he lived in to build a car park, leaving him without a home or steady work. The years after retirement were filled with sadness. Turpin suffered from depression, weighed down by financial struggles, and his doctor believed he had become punch-drunk from years of blows to the head. He had grown bitter and often refused to talk about his boxing days because he felt exploited and robbed of the money he had earned. Sadly, he was found dead from gunshot wounds in the flat above the Transport Cafe on 17th May 1966. He had a wound to the head and a second wound to his heart, which had killed him. Lloyd Honeyghan. Lloyd Honeyghan was a British boxer who fought between 1980 and 1995. At his peak, he was one of the best in the world, becoming the undisputed welterweight champion in 1986 after defeating Donald Curry in a shocking upset. For a time, he held the WBC and the Ring Magazine titles, cementing his place among Britain's finest fighters. Honeyghan started his professional career in 1980 under Terry Lawless, winning his debut fight against Mike Sullivan on points. He quickly built momentum, winning his first 13 fights, including a tough battle against Costas Petru. In 1983, he earned a victory over Lloyd Hibbert in a British title eliminator, setting the stage for his rise to the top. By the mid-1980s, Honeyghan had climbed the ranks and reached world champion status. But like many boxers, Honeyghan struggled once the spotlight faded. Towards the end of his career, he found himself in financial trouble and fought longer than he should have, trying to make ends meet. At one point, he owned a Rolls-Royce and several properties, but by 1994, he was declared bankrupt. He was discharged from bankruptcy in 1997, but the money and lifestyle he once enjoyed were gone. After retirement, Honeyghan turned to the boxing business as a manager and promoter. He organized small shows in South London, but without television backing, it was hard to make them profitable. Eventually, he gave up his promoter's license. He also explored music, producing 2 reggae CDs, but that too did not bring lasting financial success. When asked about his struggles, Honeyghan defended his financial choices. He said he always made sure his 6 children were well taken care of. He also explained that boxing earnings are often misunderstood. He said, "People see these big numbers, but don't realize how it actually works." Standard deductions come to around 40%, and then the taxman's coming for his 40%. So it's not that the boxer had it and lost it. Often, they never had it. Dariusz Michalczewski. Dariusz Michalczewski was one of the most successful boxers of the 1990s and early 2000s. Born in Poland in 1968, he later fought out of Germany and built an incredible career in the ring. Between 1991 and 2005, he became a world champion in 2 weight classes, holding the WBA, IBF, WBO, and lineal light heavyweight titles, as well as the WBO cruiserweight title. For years, Michalczewski seemed unstoppable. He defended his titles again and again, racking up an undefeated record of 48-0. In 2003, he was just 1 win away from tying Rocky Marciano's famous record of 49 straight victories. A win would have also put him close to Joe Louis's all-time record for most title defenses. But when he faced Julio Cesar Gonzalez of Mexico, Michalczewski, then 35 years old, couldn't pull it off and suffered his first professional loss. Even so, he still holds the record for the most consecutive world title defenses at light heavyweight. But while his boxing career brought him fame and millions, reportedly around 30 million euros, his life outside the ring told a different story. Lavish spending, heavy drinking, and 3 expensive divorces quickly drained his fortune. By his own words, in 2011, he had thrown and drunk 30 million euros, with another 10 million gone in divorce settlements. At one point, he was described as being broke. Still, Michalczewski found a way to rebuild. He co-founded Tiger Energy Drink, a brand that became a strong competitor to Red Bull in Eastern Europe. In 1999, he secured the rights to the brand and later won a 6 million euro settlement after former partners tried to push him out. This business move helped him regain financial stability. Today, he says his finances are managed by advisors and companies, and he only checks that the money arrives in his account. His old promotional company, Universum Box Promotion, which had also represented stars like the Klitschko brothers and Felix Sturm, went bankrupt in 2012. But Michalczewski himself managed to rise above his own setbacks, turning his energy drink brand into a lasting success and keeping his name alive beyond the boxing ring. Which boxer's downfall do you think was the most shocking? Let us know in the comments section. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out our next video for more content.